So, hello everyone. I welcome you at Open Science Week 2023 at Masaryk University. Actually, it's after a whole long week that was happening around all the Czech Republic. Last week, actually, there was an Open Science Week in the Czech Republic. We met at Prague, Ostrava, Brno, at Liberec, and in Olomouc. And now we are following up it with the Open Science Week, also the special lectures on predatory journals here at Masaryk University, because we think that this topic is quite an important one to be discussed in the next months and next period. Yesterday we have heard a lecture from Professor Král from Faculty of Informatics about the mathematical journals and the predatory practices within that field. And today we have a special guest here from Poland, Emanuel. Thank you very much for joining us. And we are going to have an English lecture about opening the black box of predatory publishing. And I would say that it's very nice to have Emanuel here, because he also writes a book, so that's good. So now I'm feeling a little bit like a fan, because I hope that he is going to sign the book after that. So I just ask the online participants, it's possible to hear us properly? Just if you can say it's okay, not okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you very much with that, and we are going to start the lecture now. So Emanuel, please, the floor is yours, and welcome on the stage. Thank you very much.
I ask you for
yes.
hiding.
Yes.
Good morning and hello everyone. My name is Emanuel Kulczycki. My background is in philosophy, but for over a decade I do research in research evaluation, centrometrics, and mostly in science of science. And I have been investigating predatory publishing for over 10 years. And I approach this phenomenon from different perspectives, because firstly, I'm an active researcher who supervise PhD students and have colleagues. I'm the head of research group. Also, I support my university in constructing various institutional policies. And for over a decade, I'm also a policy advisor to the Polish Ministry of Science and Higher Education, and I was responsible for co-designing research evaluation system, and I was responsible for the so-called Polish journal ranking used in the national research evaluation system. This is why predatory publishing and predatory journals are extremely interesting topic to me. We, in my research group at the Adam Mickiewicz University, we have been doing various studies on predatory publishing. I will share the key results with you. But also in the network of research evaluation, social science and humanities, which was co-section, now it's the association, we also investigate the issue of publishing and issue of publication pressure, which makes that researchers change their behaviors and practices. And I will start my presentation by explaining why predatory publishing might be important and useful concept and why it might be harmful. I will start for presenting the origins of the discussion on predatory publishing. Then I will share with you the results of our studies showing the bigger picture of predatory publishing, and I will present you how we can manage this issue from various perspectives. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I have been investigating predatory publishing for over a decade. And on this slide, I try to visualize some kind of the discussion which are going in various fields on predatory publishing. And in 2012, when Jeffrey Beall published his first list of predatory journals and list of standalone publishers which might be perceived as predatory, the label predatory journals was coined, and we started to discuss about journals of low quality, of low peer review, which makes money on articles. But frankly speaking, after 10 years, the discussion of predatory publishing is changing its subject. There are no predatory journals in the sense they were in 2012. Around 2017, most of those journals which were identified by Bill were not active. There were just a couple of them. Only part of them published any paper in 2017. But for the last 4 years, in various European countries, but also in other continents, we have a huge discussion on predatory publishing, which actually is dedicated to totally different set of journals. And in our Central and Eastern European countries, I would say a hallmark of this discussion is a discussion on MDPI journals. There are journals by Hindawi, journals by Frontiers, but this discussion is called Discussion on Predatory Publishing. I will try to show you later that it's not the same. What I'm trying to say using this slide is the discussion which started with Bill on predatory journal and the discussion on the quality of NDPI, Frontiers and Hindawi journal is quite a different thing. We use the same label, but the content and the problem and the challenges are quite different. So what is the origin of the term predatory journal and why it might be perceived as a very old issue? So firstly, when we talk about predatory publishing and we investigate what is the key feature of predatory publishing, most often we see that there is no peer review. It's stated that those journals do not make any peer review, or the quality of peer review is very, very low, and the peer review process is too fast. And frankly speaking, we had several experiments and studies showing that in various journals there might be low quality peer review. Alan Sokol's hoax is the most well-known study showing that in the journal of the humanities, the postmodern jargon might be published as an important study. But what is important, those old debates connected only the quality of the journal and science with a lack of proper peer review. In the debate on predatory publishing, now we combine this with business model and earning money. So at the very beginning, in 2012, Jeffrey Bill stated that those journals publish any paper just to make money. And now we also discuss about MDPI, Frontiers, and Hindawi journals, that they are huge. They publish hundreds of journals just to generate profit. And of course, we have this discussion for many, many years. We also discussed about vanity presses for monographs. We know that there are various companies which just publish papers, publish monographs. We have a couple of, for example, German companies which send emails to MA students, giving them opportunity to publish their thesis as books. So the process of publishing any paper and call it scientific has a long history. But as I mentioned, the huge discussion started when Bill coined the term. Because when we have a term, when we have a nice label, it's easier to discuss. And for Bill, predatory journals are scammers that deceive scholars to publish in them and do not follow basic publishing standards such as peer review. He was talking about peer review, but frankly speaking, he was talking against open access. We have conducted a study, and I will show the results, showing that the main enemy for Bill was not low quality peer review, but open access. For him, subscription model was the best choice to sustain the best quality journals and open access as a new emerging model was a threat to this all good times of subscription models. And why in various places, at institutional level, at the academic communities, at the government, this predatory publishing is so popular as a term to use? Because it's very easy to say something about research communities and the whole process of publishing when we have a dichotomy. We have good guys and bad guys. We should find only good guys and avoid bad guys. And it's very easy to say to young scholars, follow those and avoid this. However, most often, good guys are presented as oligopoly of publishers. Good guys are the biggest guys like Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, Taylor, Francis, and Sage. And the bad guys are those others. And this very easy to draw picture is visible in various discussions. However, as I mentioned, for me, predatory publishing is a label. And it's a label which is used to name a very complex practices of publishing. And those complex practices, about which I will talk later, are results of unequal power relations. It means that many scholars published in journals called predatory journals because they are forced by various national regimes, institutional expectations, metrics-driven expectations. And the real predators for me are not those journals. I'm not saying they are good and we should follow them and publish in them, but publishers who have very aggressive business models are the actual predators which exploit scientists. As I mentioned at the beginning, I do believe that the concept might be useful. It does not mean that we should keep using it, but its usefulness is described by the possibility of naming the massive expansion of low-quality journals based on APC models. But we have to remember that when Bill created his list, the APC of those journals, those predatory journals, was $50, $60, $15, $100. Now we are talking about MDPI, and we are talking about thousands of dollars. We should also be talking about Nature Group and talking about $10,000. So it is easy to say about low quality journals and combine it with APC model. It is also, as I mentioned, a very easy tool to say those journals are bad, those are good, publish only in this. However, I will show it later. What does it mean? Good journal depends on the context in which we work. And when we investigate the motivations of researchers or policymakers while they use the concept of predatory publishing, they often say that it's very easy to use this label and explain researcher why they should avoid this kind of journals. Because when they hear predatory journals, it means it's something really, really bad. But I want to also focus on the harmfulness of the concept of predatory journals and predatory publishing. So firstly, when we talk about predatory journals, we focus on journals published in English in non-English speaking countries. When you investigate Bill's list, there are over 90% of journals publishing in English in non-English speaking countries. When you take into account the list of journals currently in the only official list of predatory publication channels, that is the Cable's report on questionable publishing, there are just a couple of Polish journals. From my perspective, in Poland we have over 3,000 scientific journals. Many of them are predatory, but the Western world, which use the concept of predatory publishing, is not interested in journals, even based on APC models, if they do not publish in English. So we create by this label the worldview in which if you are using English in non-English speaking countries, probably you generate predatory science. And when we use predatory publishing as a concept, we focus too much on business models of small journals, but we do not see practices of Elsevier, we do not see practices of Springer, which are actually very aggressive. They change our situation as researchers. We pay a lot of money to them, but we perceive this as a very prestigious journals. And the discussion of predatory journals is the old discussion on whether we can assess a single paper published in a journal by assessing the quality of a journal. So we focus on containers and we do not focus on articles and their content. And I will show you the results of the study, why this point is important to understand why such journals are predatory journals are useful both for scientists from semi-peripheries and from center. And two of the most known and suggested ways to defend against predatory publishing are, the first one, raise awareness among scientists and told them, this is a bad publication channel, you should avoid this, and we should change regulations. And of course, the other is promote quality, not quantity culture. However, and here's a huge problem, what is called quality in various countries is the reason of pushing researchers to predatory publishing. Because at the national policies, there is often implemented the reasoning that if you publish in English, it's a quality science. If you publish outside your country, it's a better science than if you publish at your domestic publishing house. We investigated a lot of national policies, and it's often the case. So publishing in any journal outside your country is better than publishing in a good journal in your country. And this is one of the reasons why saying just promote quality doesn't work, because the quality is defined in various countries at the national level in a very tricky way. A couple of months ago, I wrote an opinion paper for Times Higher Education that we won't defeat predatory journals just by making a list of them. Because in the internet, a new anonymous website on predatory publishing emerged. They list all, for example, MDPI journals, and they call them predatory journals, that all journals published by MDPI are predatory. And from my perspective, a person who investigates this issue for many years, it's not the way to fight with them. Because we are not able to convince scholars to stop publishing in such journals if their workplace, if their salary depends on publishing in journals which are perceived as reputable, prestigious by their universities, by their governments. So the only way to change the situation is not to fight with such journals, but to reduce publication pressure. Publication pressure through changing the evaluation regimes, to changing incentives, to changing the way how we distribute monetary rewards if they are distributed. As I mentioned, I would like to share with you some results of empirical studies we have done on predatory publishing, which shed the light of some of those points I shared with you. Firstly, we investigated all the discussions and studies by 2020 on predatory publishing. And we found that the majority of them are based just on Bill's list. And almost all researchers who used Bill's list took his reasoning and just stated, this is the state of the art. If journal is open access, if journal has APC model and is published in English in non-English speaking countries, it's a predatory journal. And this type of thinking has been visible in all studies which are uncritical to Bill's list. I must say that the Bill list many years ago, it was very useful. I also used Bill list to investigate what we can say about those journals, but many studies using Bill's list combine open access and open science as one of the key reasons of establishing such kind of journals. A couple years ago, at my university, at the Department of Philosophy, we created fake scientists and sent applications to the so-called predatory journals and asked for the acceptance to be a part of editorial board. Our this fake colleague Anna Olga Szust in Polish, or Szust means fraud, that we call it Dr. Fraud, was accepted in many journals. Even 4 times we were accepted as editor-in-chief without asking for it. However, we started this study in 2015, so it was just the beginning of the discussion of predatory publishing. So this is why this paper showed that it might be a problem because only the so-called predatory journals accepted the request from Dr. Fraud. But what is interesting is that, of course, we sent information before publishing the paper to all journals that it was a sting operation. We published many media pieces about the study. We gave a lot of interviews about the study. So we thought that Dr. Fraud, even she has its own Wikipedia page, is well known. But she is still used by those publishers to promote conferences and journals. Every year, because I have a Google Earth, I found that Anna Olga Szust is editorial board member of International Advisory Board of New Events. And when we combined this information with other results from our studies, we still see that Poland is perceived as a Western country. So having a person from Poland in our international board sounds very, very nice. But of course, I cannot generalize those results. I just wanted to show you that a couple years ago, I also used Bill's list as the point of reference in some studies. But as I mentioned, the content of predatory publishing changed, and our thinking about this concept also has changed. And we wanted to investigate whether journals which are called predatory journals are used by researchers who publish in regular journals or prestigious ones defined as they are defined in various countries as journals indexed in Web of Science. This is why we designed a study which took us over 3 years, because all the data had to be investigated manually, because as you know, those old predatory journals are not indexed in any international database, and it's impossible to do the study. So this is why thanks to a huge project we have, we just manually collected the data, and we investigated whether the journals here are called blacklisted, whether blacklisted on Bill's list or the Cable's list, were cited by the papers indexed in Web of Science. So on average, 13% of papers published in predatory journals were cited by Web of Science journals, and 1/3 of those citations were from journals with impact factor. So here you have those papers, whether the journals were listed only on Bill's list, or Bill's list and Cable's list, or just on the Cable's list. And on the right side, you have the indexes of the Web of Science, Journal Citation Report, Emerging Citation Index, and what kind of journals from which indexes cite those papers. So it was just the first step. So we were able to say, guys, you are talking that they publish just a creepy and shitty papers, but they actually we use them. 13% is a normal percentage for various semi-peripheral journals to be cited. And we have to remember that those journals were not indexed in Web of Science. So on this side, we have journals not indexed on Web of Science. On this side, journals indexed in Web of Science. But we were interested why people cite those papers and who cite them. I will show you a part of the results because we have used a citation content-based analysis, and we just investigated citation by citation, who, what, and in what way cited. We had 3 coders, and we coded not only in which part, for what purpose, but we also tagged sentiment analysis, and we also provide, I would say, geopolitical analysis. And this part of the results I want to share with you. Because when we read those papers and those parts where the paper were cited, we found that papers in Web of Science cited the so-called predatory journals because they were the only source of the current data for peripheral countries or semi-peripheral countries. So if you want to know something on the banking system in Nigeria or social problems in India, you have no other choice to cite those papers because they are the only source of information in English for such countries. So on the one side, we are saying that journals called predatory are diminishing science. On the other side, many authors claim that there are no other sources to know something about countries in which publishing in predatory journals is well perceived or well visible. We also investigated the so-called questionable conferences. The 2 biggest companies in the world is the American Omics and Turkish Vasset. They organize events, a lot of events in one place, and there are many researchers who travel around those places. But we also investigated that there are not only researchers from semi-peripheral countries, but also from the best universities, because the majority of conferences are located in top touristic destinations. However, what is important, the structure of conferences, for example, for Vasset, is like this. Here we have an event. Let's assume that is the whole conference. But Vasset announced that it organizes 60 conferences at the same time. And at this room, at the same time, there are conferences of the meat production, archaeological challenges, philosophy of Plato, and so on, with the same program. So you can apply to the conference. And this is the actual event in the hotel room, for example, or some university place, and you get a program with the name you want. And we also have done this study to talk with people from top universities, why they attended to those conferences. And we realized that most often they were postdocs or young researchers now in the business or in the industry, and they were just not aware of such a situation and the reputation of those conferences. They just wanted to go. And I'm not saying that it was the majority of the motivations, but we are interested why people who, for example, did BA in Stanford and MA at Harvard presented 3 times at the VASET conferences. And the last empirical study I wanted to show you is a global survey, because too many times I heard that publishing in predatory journals and with predatory publisher destroy careers of researchers. I know that it's rational to think about this in this way, but we just collected a lot of data on people who publish in those places, and we created a survey. We collected over 2,000 fully completed responses, and what we found? There was mostly positive impact of publishing a very specific paper, because we were asking what was the impact of publishing a given paper by the person to which we sent a survey. So almost 500 researchers replied that the impact was passing a performance assessment, obtaining degree, 314, promotion or job offer, financial award. Of course, there was also a negative impact, but as you can see, the numbers are lower. Paper was not taken into consideration. I had to return research funding. I was reprimanded. 9 researchers were fired, and 200 respondents had not included this publication on the list of the achievements. And of course, there is negative impact, but we cannot say that there are no positive impacts for researchers. And what does it mean? It means that their countries, at their institutions, it is perceived as a normal way of producing outputs which are counted for the university, which are counted in various research evaluation regimes. So if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. If university accepts publishing at NDPI, and at the same time by publishing at NDPI, it gave financial rewards. This is why in Poland we have so many papers at the NDPI.
Good. It should be okay. You can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. So after showing you some empirical results, I want to share with you some theoretical contribution we try to make to the discussion on such publication channels, and to change the label. We call some publication channels mislocated centers of scholarly communication. And let me explain you why we
Thank you.
use new label. So firstly, we need some label to describe the role some publication channels play in the semi-periphery and have a geopolitical sensitive term to not blame scholars that they publish in such journals, because too many times we see that they are doing everything in line with the expectations of the universities and the governments. And many journals are established and maintained, and they're perceived as predatory at semi-peripheries because they are counted in research evaluation regimes. And in Central and Eastern Europe, we know this tradition very well. It started in 1830, 200 years ago in Russia, where the ministry decided that every year each professor has to publish one paper. And the ministry established a journal in which professors could publish a single paper a year. But the deans and rectors decided maybe it's not enough. We will establish at our university a journal for our professors. And then deans established at their faculties a journal in which their professors could publish one paper a year. And this is why in many countries in our regions, we have so many journals published by universities. And when we compare it with, for example, situation in Belgium or Germany, there's a huge discrepancy. We have too many journals published by the universities. This is what I'm trying to say, that if the national system forces you to publish in a specific place to sustain your work, you will do it because it's a rational choice. And in this way, you have to choose between discipline loyalty and institutional loyalty. Whether you will publish like your best colleagues in the field, or whether you will publish like your dean expects from you. So it's a fight between those two loyalties. And they are counted, those journals, because they are perceived to be linked to central countries and institutions. What I mean by this? In various countries, being linked to central countries and institutions, so big global journals, means it is indexed in Web of Science or it is indexed in Scopus, and in many, many countries it is published in English outside my own country. So if a journal meets two criteria, it's considered a mislocated center. So it is illegitimate or invisible from the perspective of the center of knowledge production. In other ways, our colleagues from UK or US would say, it's not main journal in our field, and it is legitimized in the semi-periphery due to its perceived connection to the center. So in my country, it is perceived as its main journal because it's indexed in Web of Science. It has impact factor because in my country, it is the definition of being central publication venue. So if we would think about mislocated centers of scholarly communication and have two axes, no visibility and no legitimacy in the center, and high visibility and high legitimacy in the center, and highly legitimized in the peripheries because of being perceived as connected to the center, we would say that this bottom right corner is the place where we have the majority of those mislocated centers. And I will explain on the very specific example. This journal is discussed in many countries. In some countries is delisted from the official ministerial list, is sustainability by MDPI, which is perceived as a journal invisible from the central positions, but actually perceived as a very good place to publish in many countries, and I will explain you why. So firstly, MDPI was, of course, accused of malpractices by Bill, and now we have a lot of discussion showing some issues and challenges, especially with special issues and the process of peer review. but these journals function as a mislocated because it is indexed in Web of Science and Scopus. So if really many European countries at the national levels are saying, you have to publish in Web of Science and Scopus, and researchers do it. So it is perceived as an important and central journal in those countries. Most papers are authored by non-central scholars. So scholars from the UK and US do not publish a lot of papers there. Scholars from Germany do not, but we have a lot of papers from Poland, from Spain, from Nigeria, from India, because in those countries, this journal sounds like a rational choice. The journal is not completely invisible, but it's not enough to be considered as a prestigious by central institutions. Publications in those journals might be perceived as a shortcut in our career, so researchers sometimes do not list them. Some founders during the meetings mentioned that it's not good if in your CV you have last 10 publications published with one publisher, the same one publisher, that is, for example, NDPI, and you ask for a huge grant. And this journal is still perceived as a prestigious in various countries. In other countries, it is perceived as predatory or at least questionable. And to summarize this mislocation, so mislocated centers results from misjudgment of a journal's geopolitical position of a journal, and this misjudgment is forced by various policies in countries and institutions. These journals emerge because the central institutions provide tools to legitimize them. I often use the term that there is a bibliometric legitimization. If for 20 years in many countries, policymakers and researchers and deans were saying you have to publish in journals with impact factor, and there is a journal with impact factor and researchers are publishing with these journals, and they are hearing, not in this journal, it has an impact factor, but not this one. We don't want this one specific, and they don't understand what is happening. And the current academic system creates this tension. Researchers who, of course, following their call for doing great science, but at the same time, they are struggling with producing outputs which are counted in their research evaluation regimes, sometimes use those journals as shortcuts. And I was trying to explain also the history of those various evaluation regimes in the book, which is going around the room. And I have been defining the evaluation game, that is the process of struggling with publishing issues, as publishing at the lowest possible cost if universities do not provide them with adequate financial and material conditions. And in this way, if there are expectations expressed in metrics, and we do not give enough money, enough time to researchers to meet those expectations, they will choose the way in line with the law. They will not game the system, but they will find some shortcuts. And those mislocated centers sometimes might be perceived as shortcuts. Thank you very much for your listening, and I'm very open to the discussion and the questions.
Perfect. So thank you very much. So I am going to try to moderate a little bit the discussion. So firstly, I would like to open the question from the audience that are here in the room. So anyone, any question? So someone has to be the first one. So I will be the first one, okay? And we will start the discussion. What about You said it's about the infrastructure also and about the approach of the universities and the institutions. What do you think about Diamond Open Access now rising? What do you think that this is part of the solution of the problem for coming years?
It's a very tricky and very good question. I am, since the very beginning of the idea of open access, I'm a huge advocate. And I publish in Polish handbooks and manuals how to open journals, how to do open science and so on. But at the same time, I see a lot of problems with open science, especially for the countries like our countries, for semi-peripheries. Because Diamond Open Access, which is a very great idea, is not connected with distribution of prestige and reputation. And very often researchers from the central institutions perceived publishing in Diamond Open Access journals like something really, really strange. Because, for example, we have journals which are not in the subscription model. You don't need to pay to publish there. It is funded by some university I never heard of. What kind of journal it is? So now we have this global summit in Mexico on Diamond Open Access, and I do believe it's the future, and I fully support Diamond Open Access. But I think it's the same challenge like with Open Research Europe platform.
Yeah.
We know from sociology of science that researchers need a distribution of reputation in their own academic community. And Diamond Open Access journals sometimes forget about it. I think it is the solution, but now we need a second layer. How we will convince our own community that those journals are the best choices. At the very beginning of the model, we have Royal Society journals, and they were journals of societies. And now NDPI, for example, the biggest issue for NDPI is that they just create a new journals. Oh, there is new label. So we will send thousands of emails and find editors, and we will create an artificial community. And I think sometimes with Diamond Open Access journals, it's the same. We have a university which published for 60 years journals in which our scholars from our own university publish, and now we will change the journal and think that we are starting publishing in English, we will have open access, you don't need to pay, but why you should publish them? So it's a long, not very strict response, but I think that there's a lot of challenges for Diamond Open Access. But frankly speaking, I'm totally in favor of those solutions.
Okay, so thank you very much. And I would say that it really differs based on the team or what you are publishing, because I was studying law, for example, and that is like locally based, you know. So in pedagogy, you know, in the national level. So it's it's basically where you should publish. You know, you have to publish a national one, and now you are talking about the infrastructure. But the part of the, for example, on the national level, what we get at the university is some sort of feedback. Yeah, but commercial publishers, for example, at the national level, they are providing also the marketing possibilities, you know, for the authors. That there are some local conferences, etc. So it's a really complex system, and it's the same as you mentioned from ORE. You know, the ORE, it's now there. We can use it, but sometimes what's for, you know, if you compare it to the education evaluation. Okay, so no question. I will ask now question from the online participants. If you have any questions, please raise your hand.
There is one question in the room.
Yeah, okay, I will give you a second one. And please also put your cameras on. I will stop sharing the screen, so we would be really happy if we can see you. Perfect. So Jana, it's the place is yours. Ask the question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for your talk. It was really enlightening for me. I would like to ask, what are the approaches you see that can somehow, well, I don't want to say solve this, because this is obviously a complex problem, but what are the directions that you see that we can go and somehow improve the situation?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I believe that there is at least one important way in which we can go. There is reduce publication pressure in a very wise way. What does it mean in a practical terms? So, for example, after many years in Poland, we reduced publication pressure to some extent when we changed research evaluation system at the national level. For 30 years, any researchers could publish as much as possible, and after 4 years, everything was counted. So if you have 40 publications, it was better than 5 publications. And we changed it at the national level, and only 4 publications for 4 years matters. And we see the drop of the unnecessary publications. Also, we found that some universities provided financially rewards for the best publications, but they were defined in a way that, for example, we avoid many publications at MDPI or frontiers if it's not expected by the university. So, for example, my university implemented Scopus indicators, and MDPI journals are not able to get at this very moment. So there are 2 practical solutions, but it cannot be copied to any other institution in a very simple way. So I would say there must be a general implication that only by reducing publication pressure we are able to reduce those practices. So fighting with journals will change nothing, because at one time we are fighting with small predatory journals. On the other side, we are saying we need $10,000 to publish in Nature. So it's, from me, it's 2 sides of the same 2 sides of the coin of the same problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Question. Now the question from the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Professor, for a very inspiring presentation. And I've got one question and maybe one point. And the point is concerning about terminology. And if I'm not mistaken, you've been talking about terminology predatory could be the biggest publication houses in their financial policies. And but I can see it might be tricky for this bending terminology might be tricky for academia, the perception of the term predatory. Because I think as librarians and information professionals should brush up the terminology to be clear to the academia instead of bending the terminology every time some hot issue emerges. So in my point of view, and I would like to hear what you feel about. And the question is about unambiguous criteria of detection of predatory journals from the genius ones, because many authors conduct the analysis on the 2 biased lists of predatory journals. At first, Beale's list, and the second, on the other hand, and the cables. And even according to literature, this list might be biased. And what should we next in the future? Get rid of them, or how should we work with them? Or because there is some blind or gray place of gray zone of journals standing somewhere in between the most prevalent journals on the one hand side and the genius ones on the other.
Thank you.
I hope it wasn't so complicated.
No, it was not. It's a hard question, but I try to address it. So firstly, there are no and there will be no clear criteria for predatory publishing because it's a very vague concept. And we should not expect a list of criteria because predatory journals is nice label, but it responds to the expectation that we are able to say this is bad. So from my perspective, we are not able to list journals to avoid, so blacklist them. We should work to indicate what we should follow. So we should not spend time to blacklist journals, because we will make a blacklist and another day 20 more journals will be established. We should find a way to tell researchers what to do. So firstly, there are the most easiest heuristics, that is, publish where your colleagues who you admire publish. If you think that you are able to indicate 3 the best journals in your field, read the papers, check the references, check the journals in which those cited papers were published. So it's very easy, but at the same time, from my perspective, it's a better solution than making a blacklist. On the other side, if I'm an institution, or for example, because at my university, I work with the university library, and we help our rector's office to identify issues with publication practices. So from my perspective, it's better to monitor publication practices and find some tricky and fast changes, because researchers are flexible. They can change publication practices, but good journals are not flexible. It cannot be that in 5-year period, there were no Polish paper in a journal, and in the next year, there are 90% of papers with only Polish authors. So if we are able to track some changes, or if we are able to track that, it is a example from my university, that in one faculty, researchers started to publish in journals in which they were never published, and they have 12 papers each year, it means that those journals are too flexible, I would say, because I cannot believe that the publication practices of any solid journals can change in 1 or 2 years. So to sum up, I think that blacklists are not useful in a long term. In a short term, they might be useful to some extent, but we should be focusing on finding tools to say where to publish, not what avoid. And on the other side, the university can monitor, I'm calling it flexibility, because the scholarly communication landscape has been changing all the time. We have new journals, new publishers, but in the 300 years history, we found that those changes are very, very slow, not year by year.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I ask again the online participants, so I would like to ask you, we have been talking about conferences and publication. Do you see any predatory practices within data already happening?
Data. I haven't heard, I must admit, about data. I participate in discussion about opening data. Mm-hmm. I'm not so in favor of this, especially in social science and humanities, but I haven't heard about predatory practices.
Okay,
sorry.
Perfect, thank you. Now, online participants, please, do you have any other questions? Please raise your hand if yes. So I don't see the hand, so I will pass the word again to the participant in the room, please.
Thank you. I just quickly saw in your book that you have 2 solutions, if I understood correctly. One is improving metrics and how they're used. Can you give examples of how to do that? And do international activities like the San Francisco Declaration play a role in these things? And a quick follow-up. The next would be stop using metrics. I'd be interested to know if these are, is it combined or is it, which one you would advocate for?
Thank you. At the end, I'm showing 2 solutions, and then I'm showing the third solution, because the 2 first are not so good in the long term. So the first one is to improve metrics. And for example, such initiatives like DORA Declaration or now COARA Coalition. For a short term, it's a very good way to change something, to improve using metrics. For example, if we want to use metrics to evaluate scholars, and we do it in our countries, we should not use only Web of Science Scopus because there are no enough publications in our national languages there. So it's how to improve metrics. One of the way we have to make better coverage degree, something like this. But I'm saying that it's just a short term because at the end, the metrics which we create with commercial publishers will not be good at any point of the time. So it's just for now. So what to do today and tomorrow? The other answer is to avoid using metrics. Frankly speaking, it's impossible because metrics are the foundation of our modern society. We use metrics just to modernize our world. So we cannot avoid metrics. There was never a situation where universities or academia were not governed by something, or by the church, by the government, by the business. There were also always some metrics and measures to govern the universities. And the third response, I would call it maybe revolution, because I don't believe in evolution in scholarly communication anymore. We have open science and open access, and frankly speaking, after 20 years, it's a huge party for Elsevier and Springer, and we are talking about having an open source and diamond journals and so on. So it was the evolution. We saw the evolution does not work. So firstly, we should reclaim our journals. So it's combined with diamond open access. Academia needs its own journals again, its own publishers. So it's the first thing. One of the solutions which we need is to more stable funding combined with evaluation systems which see in a long term. So if the government, because now we live in the times of accountability, wants to have a feedback for us, how the money they invested were used, we should provide something, but not in a short term, in 4 years. It should be a decade. So at the beginning, let's give the universities the expectations. We expect that in 10 years, you will achieve this, this, and this, and you have 10 years. After 10 years, we expect you will provide us information about this. If not, we are going to do this, this, and this. Now we have in almost all countries a situation that the new government came and check. We checked you, and it's not a good idea to fund you anymore. We don't want to give you more money. And I do believe that, firstly, stable conditions with long-term expectations, even expressed in metrics, are quite better than the current solutions. So we will not avoid metrics. We cannot fight metrics because they are inherited in our culture in this moment in which we live.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up a little bit again on the diamond thing. Actually, sorry. What's your opinion about the Diamond Open Access Support Center? It should be on the national level, it should be on the institution, or it should be something international, or all combined to make this move? Because if you are talking about the revolution, actually, it has to change somehow. And now we are basically discussing the structures and infrastructures, how to do that.
We see various models, and I would say it depends on the scale. Mm-hmm. Because when we look into the example of Croatia, they have a national model, but the number of journals in Croatia is not so high. In Poland, where we have over 3,000 active journals, the government has been trying to make a national platform, but at the same time, we have university platforms. So at my university, there is a platform and there is a service for open journal systems. We have almost over 100 journals. And at this moment, it's based on the institutional level. Probably there will be a national level. So from my perspective, it might be decentralized. I don't see central institution which will serve to the old context. I see decentralized solutions like open journal systems and solutions for collecting data like OpenAlex. We cannot have 20,000 different solutions, but I see that the service and support should be decentralized. For example, at each university, it might be its own center.
Okay.
And I see it works. It just works. A couple of Polish universities has such centers to support publishing business of a given university.
Thank you. Another question asking online participants. You can ask also via chat. Don't worry. I can't see anything. Okay. Any question in the audience here in the room? So I have another question about books and predatory practices. Do you see anything there is happening or not? Or
it is happening. I mentioned at the beginning such businesses like Litverlag in Germany, which sends a lot of emails to anyone just to publish books. But it's a business company. I would say that, and I'm often saying it in Poland, in Polish to policymakers and to directors, that 99% of university publishing houses are predatory publishing houses because they publish books only to get a next degree, habilitation degree or professorship for all its own employees. So actually it's not publishing books to the audience, it's just publishing books to peer reviewers to get a degree. But it's not a huge problem at us, the problem with journals, because scholarly books publications are not valorized in the same way. So it's impossible to get the same rewards or reputation by publishing 20 books, for example, like publishing 20 papers. There are still old publishing houses, there are not so many, which hold this reputation in book industry.
okay. Thank you. Oh, we have another question online. Jana, do you want to say it on the micro, or should I read it?
Yeah, I can. I just I'm expecting a distraction, just like any minute. So I'm sorry about that in advance. I would like to ask because I mean, reducing the pressure to publish is more like task for higher management of universities, governments, like not me, right, as a researcher. So is there anything else that we, especially as young researchers, postdocs and doctoral students, that we can do?
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that the response is at the institutional and policy level, but frankly speaking, it's a systemic problem. And saying that postdocs and young scholars can change the world is something unfair. So I would say that you can fight and stop publishing, but in 2 years, you will have no opportunity to work or to get funding. So from my perspective, it's the fight which should be taken by senior scholars with a privileged position, like me, for example, because I perceive myself as a person who has a privileged position to stop publishing because I have a stable position, I have all my group, and I can fight for my younger colleagues and try to reduce the pressure at my own university. From my perspective, saying that you guys are younger, you should fight for the bright future is absolutely unfair. We as these seniors should fight for the youngest. I know that I'm saying that you can change almost nothing, but it is exactly what I'm trying to say.
Very honest answer. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Michał.
My question, thank you for excellent talk. My question was a little bit, to some extent the same as Jana's. I wanted to ask about, let's say, the conversion to action at the universities and policymakers, how effective are these thoughts and these empirical findings and studies when you want to communicate it to senior management of your university or policymakers? Because we know that nowadays the Quora action is in place and many good things are happening according to this initiative. But yeah, what would you say about conversion to action?
It's always difficult. It depends how open the university and the administrators are. But I must admit that I have a couple of successes showing the results and talking with various universities and implementing this model of lower pressure, because I am not saying that there should be no pressure at all, but the pressure means that there is a pressure and there are not clear expectations. So firstly, scientists, researchers, scholars sometimes do not know what they are expected to do. So I talked with many young scholars and I asked, do you know how many papers you have to publish to be in line with the expectations of the university, of the national system and so on? And always I have the same answer. I don't know, I have to publish more and more. And frankly speaking, saying very clearly, and now it's what we are doing at our university, we are designing a clear message to the community, what you are expected to deliver in what time period. And this clear message is combined with information. If you deliver it, you will have still the stable position. If you deliver higher, you can get financial reward, because we see that we have to motivate our employees to have more publications in line with our strategy, and the strategy is more international publication in some fields, especially in social science and humanities. And after a couple of years, we found that we were able to activate a lot of scholars from those fields. And they were activated mostly by those incentives, but also by a clear message. But it was, and it's prerequisite combined with funding for research, for mobility and doing research. Because you cannot say you are expected this, this, and this. Okay, and where is my office? You have no office. So what to do? And there is situation in various universities that there is a new employee and he or she is expected to deliver 3 publications and has office in which there are 4 desks for 40 persons. And it's, I'm not saying typical, but it is the question. So it is possible to convince not only universities, but also the governments. But of course, it takes time and it takes some evidence to show.
It's about the responsibility to being able to decide what is the expectation, and to involve members of the academia, disciplinary experts, let's say, into this decision what is expected.
Yes, for example, at the university we have advisory body. It is called just the University Council for Science purposes, and often present such issues. I also the representative of my university at the Quora. So we talk how to change this. I also trying to convince my colleagues from Quora that in Central and Eastern Europe, we have quite a different model of the governance, and it's more top-down. So it's, for example, impossible to make a pilot study of a new evaluation regime of employees. At my university, we found changing the law at the national level. So from the Quora perspective, is how it's impossible. You have autonomy, yes, but we cannot evaluate our employees in any way without changing the regulation at the national level. So it's always tricky, it takes some time, but I do believe that Quora will also has to adjust expectations, because Quora's expectations are expressed in a very Western European way of thinking about higher education and research.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, next question.
Isn't it actually, on the other way, rather simple to specify what do we expect? because at the beginning of your talk, you were mentioning some article in the Times Higher Education, and I think that these institutions basically rank the universities, right? So if you want certain quality, we have basically, we can think whatever about, let's say, advantages and disadvantages of these rankings. We can say, okay, our target is somewhere. So we have some benchmark institutions where we can say, okay, if these guys are better than us, internationally ranked, why don't we check where they are publishing, what are their habits, and what is working for them, and take kind of the good from those we are trying to compete with, because of course if I will be willing to succeed as an assistant professor or full professor at the University of, I don't know, Oxford, definitely I should perform the same way as the professor who is, or the colleague who is professor there. So in principle, it's coming back to the governments, to the management, and to the decision-making bodies. But I think that it all kind of, the indicators are here just to put them in a certain way all together.
It's one of the answers, but I'm really totally against university rankings because I know how they are constructed. And because I understand what is written there, I know that they are constructed to sustain various ranks. And this is why top 10, top 20 never change. And I would say that looking into university ranking and changing, for example, sectors in our countries, like, okay, so let's see how to improve the military service in Czech Republic and look to China. I would say something like this: huge, totally different system for different country. So, for example, now my response is from the political and policy advisor level. For many years in the Polish community, researchers wanted to say, you have to give us more money and then we will be better in university rankings. And we are doing better, 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 and we are lower, lower, lower. And now they're saying, no, the community, we have to stop using it, because if we will convince the government that the university ranking is objective measure for our quality, we will never get more money. So from my perspective, I fully agree that we need some objective measure, but we cannot say, okay, let's be like Oxford or let's be like Stanford. Because I would say that, for example, Masaryk University should be compared with my university. We are in the very Poznań University. Adam Mickiewicz University has 3,000 researchers, city is 600,000 inhabitants. We operate in a similar environment and we compare ourselves. We can say, okay, we should be like what kind of universities? What is the point of reference for us? Oxford, Stanford? I would say no. It would be rather, what is the point of comparison for your university?
No, it is.
Michael? Yeah.
Sorry if I may. I would say the one thing is the university where it wants to be. Of course, I fully agree with what you said about ranking and so on. On the other hand, we are teaching. I'm from life sciences, so we are teaching master students, PhDs, and we want them to be successful worldwide, not only Czech Republic or let's say this Eastern region. That's why we have to compare ourselves with colleagues outside. And this is, I mean, I don't know how to combine what you are saying, which I kind of agree because there is system. On the other hand, I cannot say, okay, I'm living in this place in this time, and I don't want to do science, which is worldwide competitive.
Maybe because my background is in philosophy, I have more geopolitically, different approach from geopolitical perspective. Last Nobel laureate, women from Hungary. In one of the interviews, she said that the biggest issue for getting success in science for her was that she was from Hungary and had PhD from Nowhere University. And in various science studies, we see this affiliation bias. So I do believe that you do competitive and great science, but it is not recognized as such. And it is the huge issue. And one of the tools to sustain the situation are university rankings. Because I don't believe that we are worse than our colleagues in the UK. I think that you met various colleagues from various countries, and there are so many good and bad as in our countries. So this perception of the quality of our universities is co-created by such tools as university rankings. Of course, when we have PhD students, we have to teach them how to survive in the academia and how to change it. And I have no simple solutions. I struggle every day with this situation that where I work, where I come from, and what to do with my geopolitical situation.
I would just follow on that. I think that Leiden University now, they said that they are not going to use the university rankings anymore. So this is one of hundreds that did it, and we are going to see what's happening in next year actually with that. But what I read about it, it was a process, it was not like they changed it, in 3 or 4 years, something like that. And then they decided that we are not going to use it. Sometimes, if we are talking really the basics, there are many university rankings, they are at least the 3, the best one. And if you talk, I'm going to my last question, because before I ask for your last question, it was funny from the marketing point of view, because you started with Bill list and the marketing impact, on the community. So basically, regarding the university ranking, I have heard from my university that we are 450s or something like that. And in 1 month, I have heard that we are 550, and this was the marketing line, the headline on the social media. And then, you go deep. I would say 30, 40, 50% people are going to look at it in the detail. What is it? Because it doesn't make sense. But the rest, no. So you are basically producing a different story for the people that are just scrolling. And there is no obligation for any academics to look if this is 550 on that ranking or 450 on that ranking. So basically, on a really basic level, what to do, for example, to make the marketing of these, I would say, anti-predatory services, or the approach of the university towards the predatory practices much more understandable for the community. It is, for example, by comparing that if you have a phishing in cybersecurity, so basically what you mentioned, they send 1,000 emails and try to get someone on the editorial board. If we are able to connect that you are not going to give someone information about your bank account, but you are going to be phished, to the editorial board, isn't that same, from the marketing point of view? So basically, this is the question for you. If you have any recommendation how to promote, to try to maybe not do the revolution in the first place, but at least help the evolution going. Thank you.
So I will sustain this promoting good things and not showing what to avoid. So the old concept of scientific ethos, I would say. I call it also in sociology of science, it is called disciplinary loyalty. So you are loyal to the best standards of your own community, not to the standards of institutions, which can be changed very quickly by the rules, by the government. So, from my perspective, many universities don't know what is happening at the faculty level, what researchers are actually doing, because they are not talking, they are not monitoring it. And a couple of times I was asked by universities to analyze the case of predatory publishing at the universities because they thought they have a huge problem because everybody are talking about this. And we analyzed the situation and we found that, yes, there are 2-3 persons who have this flexible approach to publishing, and the rest have some couple of publications, and there is no problem at all to be handled. So I would say the first is to understand what is actually happening and then decide what we want to do, because it is a huge topic, it's a very hot topic, but do you really have a problem with it, or just everybody are talking about this and there are just a couple of people?
Okay, thank you very much. So the last call for the question from the online participants. Any questions? I don't see one. And from the audience, who is going to be the brave one for the last question? Okay, let's go.
Perhaps one not really addressing your scope here, but one slide you showed. And you mentioned that open access sometimes is the only source of data for peripheral countries. And I was wondering how you know Sci-Hub, the dark archive shadow library. Do you know how it is used? I mean, if you mention that open access is the only source, and those very expensive Elsevier nature journals are not, isn't Sci-Hub a way to access these journals at that site, the articles?
Thank you. I would just add that those papers are the only source, not only because they are open access, but they are in English describing. But regarding the Sci-Hub, I have been using Sci-Hub for many years. Now it's useless for the future, the current papers, but from my perspective, Sci-Hub is good and very bad for our call for open science. Very good because we are able to read something, but very bad because it sustains the model. It's like the situation with open science conferences which are supported by Elsevier or Springer. So the big capital supports the enemies to control them. So Sci-Hub shows for the biggest publishers that the model works because there will be some backdoor. When there is a backdoor, it works, we can sustain the model. So I would say that in our own interest is to destroy Sci-Hub and destroy them. So there is no solution, very easy solution. This is why I was saying that I don't believe in evolution, because I saw so many evolutions at national and international level in open science, and at the end, Elsevier had a bigger bucket. So, and the same issue is from my perspective with Sci-Hub.
And I will continue with that you are quite consistent, because I remember our talk in Madrid like last month when we were at Open Science Fair conference organized by Open Air, and it was very nice conference. But you were just saying that, yeah, but why these publishers are funding, this conference? It doesn't make sense from the, I would say, ethical point of view or the consistency. If we are fighting them, and it was funny, some of the presentation were against the publishers, that were actually funding the conference. So if you look at it from the bigger picture, it's it makes me smile.
This is why I said that for many people, reading The Capital by Marx should be obligatory, because it explains a lot what is happening now in academia. And it's always the case of the money, but not money in academia, outside academia, which rule our communication channels.
Okay. So that was the last question. So I would like to have a big applause once again for Emanuel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also thank you very much for joining us both online and also in person. It's kind of also special event that is connected to the visit of our colleagues from Educ Alliance, actually in Brno, that we are going to discuss in the afternoon some another topics that are driving the open science board within our universities. And basically, if I may, and I would say that this is like the follow-up of this Open Science Week that we had last week, but this is basically the end, I would say, of Open Science Week in the Czech Republic for the 2023, because what we know with my colleague Marika, there are no any other events regarding Open Science Week like the Czech Republic this week. So thank you very much, and we are very happy for the Open Science team that you were here, you were online, and keep in contact. See ya. So bye bye online, and thank you for you.